the all-new first generation S90. Now I say first generation because in a sense this car of course replaces the S80, but it is a new beginning with that new nomenclature from Volvo. And we've got all the details for you now. I've driven both the petrol and the diesel. Let's take it away with the review of the S90 from Volvo. With the brand new S90, Volvo retains its promise of staying 4-cylinder, and so there are no V6 or V8 variants. There are 3 petrols and 2 diesels, and we will get the 2 diesels for starters, followed by a petrol next year. I tested 2 of those here in Estepona near Malaga. The D4 and D5 use the same 1969cc engine block but with very different tuning. The former cranks out 190 bhp and gives you 400 Nm, and both use the same gearbox. The D5 gives you 235 horses and the torque is good at 480 Nm. The transmission is that standard 8-speed Eisenwarner automatic. I drove the diesel first. It uses a twin turbocharger and for the most part comes across as reasonably punchy and extremely refined. I can tell you that I've been driving it for some time now, and it gives you a sense of the fact that it's a 4-cylinder. So it's not a firecracker. It's not going to take off on you. It's certainly not going to give you, 0 to 100 in 4 seconds or anything like that. But the good part about it, and I think the one salient feature that is the big difference between the last D5 on the previous generation car and this one, just how refined this engine is. You almost forget that it's a diesel that you're driving. It is so silent and so smooth, and it's married pretty well to this 8-speed gearbox too. If anything, the gearbox is a little bit slower and you don't get too much of a sense of lag from the engine itself. So it's not scorching performance, but you will not be left wanting either with the D5. It responds readily, and even though I found little difference between the drive modes, the dynamic mode will have the transmission upshifting at higher revs. The steering is a bit off-center and heavy in its feel, which is a bit distracting. When you get into the individual mode on the actual dynamic drive mode settings, you can sort of fiddle around and change the feel of the steering somewhat, but it still stays a little bit hard and heavy, and that's a little disconcerting, especially when you just start driving the car and especially when you're driving it at lower speeds. But otherwise, I have to say that the driving manner of the overall car and even its suspension feel, it's been really a nice revelation, because I didn't expect that coming into this. And the optional air suspension on the car certainly does the job really well. And the good news, it will be on the car that comes to India. The car has pilot assist, which means it self-steers by keeping a watch on the lane markings on the road. So you can get your hands off the wheel, but only for about 15 seconds, because it kind of wants the reassurance that your hands are on the wheel so that you can take control if you need to. So from a safety perspective, that's important. But I've been having some fun with it. And you know what? It does a decent job. It's a little unnerving to begin with, but it does it pretty well. This will never work in India though. Never. The roads around Estepona made for good testing ground, since I got smooth coastal highway with gorgeous views of the Alboran Sea and some broken rough patches up the twisty mountain roads too. And that is when I switched to driving the petrol and had quite a blast, taking the corners nice and fast. The car responds well to that kind of treatment. It feels taut and never once loses its composure. Now, it's a conscious decision by Volvo to stay with 4 cylinders, and frankly, given the kind of usage that most people have, most buyers have from a car like this, and in India, remember, a lot of them are going to be sitting back there, you don't miss it at all. And I have to say that not with a grain of salt, but with my hand on my heart, because really, if you think about it, Sure, in sheer performance terms, it's not going to do the same thing that a V6 or a V8 can. But in everyday driving terms, it certainly does everything you want it to. Handling and precision are at the forefront here, though again, let down ever so slightly by that heavy steering. The T6 motor is very smooth and only occasionally does it give off the familiar rumble of a 4-cylinder. The car's Bowers & Wilkins sound system sends out active noise cancellation so that the cabin remains nicely cut off from the environment outside. The S90's cabin is Volvo's trump card. It's smart, airy, very well crafted, sensually designed and impeccably built. This car pampers you and certainly gets the gadget geek in you very excited, because you've got the virtual cluster, you've got the sensor system that we now know very well from the XC90 with its little iPad-like functionality. It's really cool, it really works well, and it's very adaptable as well. In fact, that's pretty much true of everything you see here in terms of equipment, in terms of material. You better believe it, all of this is also coming to India. That's the other good news, that everything you see here will be on the inscription trim that comes to India, including the Bowers & Wilkins sound system. Now, the kind of colors and the options that you're seeing here, well, some of that could vary, but I'm really surprised that given how swanky and just beautifully crafted this cabin is, the steering column, it's not electrically adjustable. You have to do it manually. And while that's in a way a good thing, because you get exactly the spot that you like, and it kind of goes nice and low as well, which is good. The downside is there's no memory function to sort of save your perfect steering settings. So if somebody messes that up, you have to do it manually again. Volvo says it's taking that feedback into consideration and may introduce an electric adjustment on the wheel soon. The car's virtual instrument cluster allows you to change its theme from chrome-ringed instruments to an icy blue glass-like look, and of course the red dials for the performance feel. This is the second product based on Volvo's Scalable Product Architecture, or SPA, after the XC90. A modular approach that is proving successful for the Swedish car maker. So now you know that this car has got the SPA treatment as well. As far as the face goes, it is the new face of Volvo. It's what you've seen with the XC90, so I don't need to explain that part to you. You've also seen it with a lot of Volvo concepts of late. And yes, Thor's hammer, pretty much expected to go into every Volvo from here on in. Even the V40 facelift, remember, has already got it. It's the side of the car that also has a nice distinct identity. I think I like that. I like the fact that the work in the metal and this little bit of a light catching element down here, it's different. So is the roofline. I like that. I like the fact that it's so distinctly different. In fact, the whole boot is different. This part of the car seems a little overdone to me because it's maybe very different for Volvo, and I'm having a hard time just swallowing that. But I suspect that once you start seeing these cars on the road, this is something that will become somewhat of a distinct rear-end identity for Volvo's design. The boot lid itself, though, is very well sculpted, and the taillights are very different indeed. Volvo flogged the predecessor of this car, the second generation S80, for 10 long years. The new S90 is a much needed model. It gets to us soon, with bookings opening next week. Expect prices to be in the 50 to 55 lakh rupee region, and it will compete with the 5 Series, E-Class, A6 and XF.